Hey guys, here I am with a new video of BRAINSTEM syndromes. So I have got midbrain, pons, medulla syndromes and a few questions. We'll solve these questions at the end. First, let me explain you the entire topic in detail so that you'll not make mistakes in this topic any further. This is totally a conceptual thing, and I have got you mnemonics also to remember few of the syndromes. So let's get started now. First thing that you need to remember here is 2 points that see, whenever you take a cross section of spinal cord, or let us suppose, see, if this is the cross section of the midbrain, let us say, and this is for pons, and this is for medulla. So in these three, this together constitute brainstem, right? So in these three, you have few structures which lie in the midline and few structures which lie laterally, that is sideways. So in the midline structures, all M's come, and in the side structures, that is the lateral structure, it is about all S's. So let me show you what are all those M's and S's. See here, in the midline, you have medial longitudinal fasciculus. So medial longitudinal fasciculus is related to I, and another M for motor tract of upper motor neurons, that is the corticospinal tract. This is the main motor tract. Coming to another M, that is medial lemniscus, which is regarding the dorsal column. Dorsal column, when it travels up, it becomes medial lemniscus, so which is related to proprioception and vibration senses and position sense too. Coming to another M, which is about motor nuclei of the cranial nerve. So the point that is important here is what all cranial nerves are involved in this motor nuclei. So it is 3, 4, 6 and 12, which is written over here, which is 3, 4, 6 and 12. So what you need to know here is 3, 4, 6 are for extraocular muscles, right? So in the extraocular muscles, you have lateral rectus and superior oblique, for which LR6 and SO4, whereas rest all extraocular muscles is cranial nerve 3. So this is the thing we always learn, right? LR6 and SO4 is the mnemonic we know, and remaining extraocular muscles is cranial nerve 3. And for the 12th nerve, which is the hypoglossal nerve, it is for tongue. So why I am teaching in this way, it is because the extraocular muscles and the tongue muscles, the nerve supplied to them belongs to GSE column, guys. In the cranial nerve columns, you have 7 cranial nerve columns, right? Like GSE, GSV, SSA, SSE and all. So we have a video on that also in our channel. Please watch that. I have explained all the cranial nerve columns with the mnemonics. I'll provide the link in the end of this video. And see, so the extraocular muscles and the tongue muscles are supplied by the column GSE. The GSE is column, that is general somatic efferent column, is about these 4 nerves, 3, 4, 6 and 12. So you can remember that way, so that this bit is also done, right? In the GSE, what all nerves are involved? That is 3, 4, 6 and 12. Few people remember it like the numbers in which 12 becomes the like factor. Like in the 3, 4, 6 and 12, you can get 3 4s are 12, and in the 6th table also you get 12, right? So few people remember it that way, that 3, 4, 6 and 12. But I find it easier to remember like extraocular muscles and tongue muscles are supplied by 3, 4, 6 nerves is for extraocular muscles and 12th is for tongue, which constitutes general somatic efferent cranial nerve column. This completes the M. So all M's is done. Now coming to lateral, that is sideways. It is about all S's, right? So first S is sympathetic chain. Sympathetic chain lies in the lateral side. Lateral in the cross section part, it is on the lateral parts. Whereas another S is spinothalamic tract. Spinothalamic tract is for pain and temperature. Lateral spinothalamic tract is for pain and temperature. Next is another S, which is spinocerebellar tract. And another S is for sensory nuclei of the cranial nerve. So here we have done with the motor nuclei of the cranial nerve, and here comes the sensory nuclei of the cranial nerve. So excluding that 3, 4, 6, 12, all the other nerves, like 5 here, in between you have 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. So all this comes under lateral. So the M and S mnemonic is done, right, for the midline and the sideways. Now let us understand another concept. See, in the spinal cord, so let us suppose this is the spinal cord, this is the anterior end, this is the canal, and this is the posterior end. So what happens is, from the receptor, the afferents come and they go upwards dorsally. This is the posterior, right, or the dorsal side, right? So this is the dorsal column, guys. So dorsal column is all about position sense, vibration sense, and proprioception. So dorsal column, it goes above, constitutes the ML, that is medial lemniscus. And it crosses, see, from both sides. This is also the dorsal column going above medial lemniscus, and it crosses to the opposite side. So this crossing over happens below the level of medulla. So this crossing over happens below the level of medulla. So let us suppose here is the brainstem with midbrain, pons, and medulla. So below the medulla, this crossing over has occurred. So what happens is, see, if you consider there is a lesion, let us suppose there is a lesion in the midbrain level. So that, see, these fibers are cut here. So this is the right side, this is the left side, right? So when the lesion is on the right side of the midbrain, the fibers that are in the right side of the midbrain are actually coming from the left side of the body. Isn't it? So what happens is, in the dorsal column, when the crossing over is happening here, when there is a right lesion, that is right midbrain syndromes or right midbrain lesions, the contralateral side sensations are lost. Similarly, the thing is for spinothalamic tract also. So this is the spinal cord. Let us say from this side, that is this is the right side and this is the left side. So from here, laterally, the spinothalamic tract comes and it crosses over. So from this side also, the tract comes and it crosses over. So the only difference here is the crossing over occurs right at the level of spinal cord only in the lateral spinothalamic tract pathway. So that is the only difference. The crossing is the common thing. Here the crossing occurs at the level of or below the level of medulla, whereas here the crossing occurs at the level of spinal cord itself. So the same story again. So let us suppose this is midbrain, this is medulla, this is pons, and this is midbrain. So what happens? See, these fibers are going above, and let us say there is a damage here. So in the right side midbrain lesion, again the senses are being carried from the left side of the body, right? See, track this, isn't it? So left side pain and temperature are lost. So by this, I just want to explain that whenever a tract lesion is there, that leads to contralateral loss of senses. In the midbrain or the brainstem syndromes, in the midbrain pons medulla syndromes, whenever the tract is cut or whenever a lesion is involving the tract, then the contralateral side body senses are lost. I hope this is clear. But whenever we talk about the cranial nerve lesions, see, this is the midbrain, pons, and medulla. So what happens is, the thing that you need to understand is, in the midbrain, you have 2 cranial nerves. In the pons, you have 4, and in the medulla, you have 4. So there is a rule of 4 that you need to know. That is, at the level of pons, you have 4 cranial nerves. Above the level of pons, you have 4 cranial nerves, and below the level of pons, you have 4 cranial nerves. That is 1, 2, 3, and 4. These 1 and 2 are not related to the brainstem actually. They directly arise from the above the midbrain, whereas from the midbrain you have 3 and 4, and pons next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and in the medulla you have 9, 10, 11, and 12. So what happens is, see, both the sides you have nerves, right, bilaterally. When let us suppose here is the lesion. So whenever there is a lesion in the third cranial nerve nucleus, what happens is the ipsilateral side, there is loss of sensations. Like, see, if the third cranial nerve or nucleus is damaged, right side eye, right third cranial nerve is involved, then right side eye problem occurs. If the left one is involved, then left side problems occur. So that means when the cranial nerve lesions are there, that leads to ipsilateral loss of functioning. Whereas the long tracks, there is contralateral loss of functioning. So the same points I have written here actually. You can read it over here. Cranial nerve lesions, same side, that is ipsilaterally affected. Whereas for the long tracks, that is opposite side, that is contralateral side is affected. The same thing I have demonstrated in a neat diagrammatic format here. So you can read that when you have this PDF. I will provide this PDF on the channel, our Telegram channel. So these 2 points are also done, and this M and S points are also done. So these are the basic concepts that you need to know. I have taken time to explain these things because this is the most important thing, and you'll understand all the other syndromes, like the coming further pages of this PDF, very easily if you get these things straight into your mind. So this is done. Now coming to the blood supply or the arterial supply. As already discussed guys, midbrain has 3 and 4, that is done. Pons has next 4, that is 5, 6, 7, 8 cranial nerves, and medulla has 9, 10, 11 and 12. That is clear. Now coming to what is this written over here, that is medial and lateral sides, right? So what I have told you, 3, 4, 6 and 12 lies in the midline. That means medially. Since the midbrain has 3 and 4, both of them are in the medial. Coming to 6. 6 is in the pons, right? 5, 6, 7, 8 are in the pons. So 6 is written in the medial of the pons. 3 and 4 in the medial. And coming to 12. 12 is in the midbrain. So 12th cranial nerve is written in the medial. Rest all are the lateral ones. Like 5, 6 is in the medial. Then again 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are the lateral sides. So that is the explanation for this diagram. So midbrain, pons and medulla is done. Coming to the arterial supply. What happens is, see guys, this is the circle of Willis for you. So I have brought an individual image also. So see, I'll track these arteries. So try to look at this diagram carefully. You have 2 vertebral arteries. See, you have 2 vertebral arteries which join together to form the basilar artery. So 2 vertebral arteries joins together to form basilar artery. And this basilar artery divides into posterior cerebral artery, that is PCA. 2 V's joins together to form one basilar artery which gives 2 posterior cerebral artery. Now the important points that you need to know in this is that for the vertebral artery you have an important branch called pica, that is posterior inferior cerebellar artery. So this is pica. Coming to basilar artery, you have one branch called ica. Everything same except for anterior. See, anterior inferior cerebellar artery. So ica is a branch of basilar artery, whereas pica is a branch of vertebral artery. And basilar artery also gives another branch called superior cerebellar artery. So here inferior are done, right? Inferior cerebellar artery has 2 branches again. One is anterior and one is posterior. So inferior is done, whereas superior is from basilar artery. And posterior cerebral artery arises from the basilar artery. So this is the important point that you need to know. How to remember that? Like basilar artery, guys. So I used to remember it like A is for ica and S is for superior cerebellar artery. So that would be easy, right? So basilar artery has A in it, that is ica, and S, that is superior cerebellar artery adjacently. Whereas for the vertebral artery, it is pica. I hope this is clear now. So let us see in this diagram too. So there are 2 vertebral arteries which join together to form the basilar artery, and the basilar artery is giving posterior cerebral artery, and here it is superior cerebellar artery. So this is the basilar artery and it has ica. This is the vertebral artery and it has pica. One more important point, that vertebral artery has the posterior extension like this. which join together to form the anterior spinal artery, which is this anterior spinal artery. So see the coloring here, the blue color ones, that is the midbrain, is by blue color artery, that is PCA. Coming to this purple color one, pons, is supplied by basilar and ica, whereas medulla is supplied by vertebral artery, posterior inferior cerebellar artery and anterior spinal artery. So see guys, here you have this this area here is midbrain, pons and medulla, right? So you can look at here also. Let me erase this for you. See, in the center you have anterior spinal artery and vertebral artery. So in the medial side of the midbrain, this in the medial side of the medulla, that is supplied by anterior spinal artery and vertebral artery, whereas lateral medulla, here this area, lateral medulla is supplied by this pica. Similarly, midline of the pons, that is medial end of the pons, is supplied by the basilar, whereas the lateral pons is supplied by the ica. Whereas for midbrain, it is all supplied by PCA. There is no medial end and lateral end. Midbrain is totally supplied by PCA. So that is the thing written over here in the tabular format. So midbrain, medially and laterally you have PCA. Pons, medially it is basilar and laterally it is sideways branch, that is ica, and medulla it is vertebral and anterior spinal artery in the middle and pica in the lateral side. So this completes the blood supply. So this is the important conceptual page that you need to learn. With this you can solve every question from the BRAINSTEM syndromes. So let's get started now. Firstly, the midbrain syndromes. Let me change the color. Yeah. So midbrain syndromes, this is the beautiful diagram I've got for you with the same thing, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the middle and 9, 10, 11, 12 in the medulla. Firstly, midbrain syndromes have two types, that is ventral midbrain syndromes and dorsal midbrain syndromes. Ventral midbrain syndromes are WBC, that is Weber's, Benedikts and Claude's, whereas dorsal is P and N, that is Parinaud and Nothnagel. So these are the two important divisions, ventral midbrain syndromes and dorsal midbrain syndromes. WBC in the ventral and dorsal is P and N. So see guys, this is the structure of the midbrain that you need to understand. So this here, this area is substantia nigra, which is related to Parkinson's disease, as all of us know. This is the substantia nigra. So midbrain has three important parts guys. So this is the basis. This is the tegmental part, that is in the middle one, and the posterior most or the dorsal most one is the tectal part. So three divisions of the midbrain in the cross section are basis, tegmentum and tectum. Coming to the other labelings, this is the cerebral aqueduct. So here you have the periaqueductal grey matter, and this is labeled as SC, which is superior colliculus. So one thing you need to remember that, see, if this is the midbrain, this is the ventral side and this is the dorsal side. So you have two colliculi on the dorsal side. One is superior colliculus and another is inferior colliculus. At the level of superior colliculus, you have third cranial nerve nucleus, whereas at the level of inferior colliculus, you have fourth cranial nerve nucleus. Remember that point. So since it is at the level of superior colliculus, the nerve which is arising from here is the third nerve, which is from the third nucleus. And right ventral to the third nucleus, there is another nucleus labeled here, which is red nucleus. And the three dots over here are medial lemniscus, trigeminal lemniscus and spinal lemniscus. So medial lemniscus is about dorsal column, trigeminal lemniscus as the name itself, that is for fifth nerve, and spinal lemniscus is for lateral spinothalamic tract, that is for pain and temperature. So these are the three lemnisci labeled over there, and here in the basis part you have three further divisions which are divided into 1/5, 3/5 and 1/5 parts. So medial 1/5 is about frontopontine fibers, which is related to the seventh cranial nerve, whereas the middle 3/5 is for the pyramid or the corticospinal tract. So here you have all the three important tracts guys in the dorsal in the midbrain, which is dorsal column, and here you have the corticospinal tract, and here you have the lateral spinothalamic tract, right? So this completes the labeling of the midbrain. Now let us understand the individual syndromes here. Firstly, here comes the Weber's syndrome for you. So Weber's syndrome is this one, guys. So let me label that Weber's syndrome in blue for you, so that see, Weber's syndrome involves these fibers and the third nerve and the pyramidal tract. So this is the Weber's syndrome for you. Ipsilateral third nerve is involved, as you can see here it is touching, and upper motor neuron of 7th, because frontopontine fibers are involved, right? So upper motor neuron of 7th, and the pyramidal tract, which is the corticospinal tract, is involved. Since the nerve is involved, I have already told you that cranial nerves always results in ipsilateral lesions. So ipsilateral third nerve causes ipsilateral extraocular muscle movement loss, and 7th nerve, since it is the upper motor neuron loss, it leads to contralateral hemi loss. Like, see, only this area is lost. So lower half of the in the lower half of the face on the contralateral side, upper motor neuron of the 7th nerve lesions are seen. I'll explain you this 7th nerve lesion in a separate video, which is just short 5 minutes video. There you can understand what is the difference between UMN and LMN lesions of 7th nerve. For now, remember that in the Weber's syndrome, you have 3rd nerve involvement, 7th nerve involvement, and the pyramidal tract. Since the word tract, like pyramidal tract is there, that leads to contralateral loss. So that is what I have written here. Ipsilateral cranial nerve palsy and contralateral hemiplegia, that is called as crossed hemiplegia. So if the lesion is on the right side, that leads to right side third nerve palsy, whereas left side hemiplegia. Because corticospinal tract is all about motor functions, right? So when this is lost, that results in hemiplegia. So that completes the Weber's syndrome for you. Then comes the Benedict syndrome. In the Benedict syndrome, you have all these medial lemniscus, trigeminal lemniscus, spinal lemniscus involved, and the ipsilateral third nerve, same like Weber's syndrome, and contralateral extrapyramidal signs, that is contralateral tremor, is involved because the red nucleus is involved. So guys, whenever the red nucleus is involved, remember that results in tremors. So in the Benedict syndrome, you have all the features of Weber's syndrome as well as Clot syndrome. Since third nerve is involved and the contralateral tremors are seen because of the red nucleus involvement, that is what you need to know about Benedict syndrome. Coming to the Clot syndrome is all about red nucleus, that's why contralateral tremors, and ipsilateral third nerve is involved. See, in the red nucleus, what happens is, guys, here this is the medulla, and here this is the pons, and here this is the midbrain, right? So here in the sideways you have cerebellum. So in the cerebellum you have 3 peduncles: superior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, and inferior cerebellar peduncle. So what happens is the fibers from the superior cerebellar peduncle goes to the opposite side of midbrain, that is from the right side they goes to left red nucleus. So whenever this red nucleus damage is seen, we see contralateral ataxia or contralateral tremors. But when only directly this superior cerebellar peduncle is involved, then that causes ipsilateral, because the fibers are coming from this side only. So whenever the superior cerebellar peduncular lesions are seen, that leads to ipsilateral ataxia and all. But whenever the red nucleus is involved, that leads to contralateral ataxia, because the fibers from superior cerebellar peduncle, few fibers cross to the red nucleus. So that's why contralateral here, because of the superior cerebellar peduncle fibers. That explains the Clot syndrome, Weber's syndrome, and Benedict syndrome. Now coming to the dorsal syndromes. The ventral WBC are done: Weber's, Benedicts, and Clots. Coming to the dorsal syndromes, you have 2: Parinaud and Nothnagel. Parinaud, it is at the level of tectum, that is superior colliculus. See here, at the level of superior colliculus, posteriorly, that is at the tectum, which is dorsal, you have Parinaud syndrome. In the Parinaud syndrome, if you have to remember one single word, that must be sunsetting sign. So Parinaud syndrome is having impaired upward gaze. So this is an important clincher point: impaired upward gaze, light near dissociation, sunsetting sign, and Collier's sign, which is about lid retraction, and skew deviation of the eyes, Argyll-Robertson pupil. So Argyll-Robertson pupil meaning accommodation, reflex, present. See, A for accommodation, R for reflex, and P for present. Accommodation, reflex, and present, and light reflex is absent. That is the reason you have light near dissociation. Light is for light reflex and near is for accommodation. There is a dissociation because accommodation is present whereas light reflex is absent. And impaired upward gaze is an important point for Parinaud syndrome, which occurs at the superior colliculus level. Coming to the Nothnagel syndrome, Nothnagel syndrome occurs in the quadrigeminal plate. Quadrigeminal plate is nothing but superior and inferior colliculus on the both sides. Are 4 colliculi together, right? So that is quadrigeminal plate, which constitutes the tectum of the midbrain. So that leads to ataxia and ipsilateral third nerve palsy. So that is regarding the Nothnagel syndrome. The important word here is ataxia because superior cerebellar peduncle is also involved in Nothnagel syndrome. So this completes the easy midbrain syndromes for you, dorsal and ventral. I hope now you'll remember every single point, the reason behind the tremors, reason behind ataxia, why contralateral, why ipsilateral, everything I have explained in detail for you. See, here I have attached images also. So as already discussed, once see this image, cerebral aqueduct, periaqueductal grey matter. In the tectum, that is the dorsal part, you have superior colliculus. Below that will be the inferior colliculus. This is a cross section at the level of superior colliculus. So that's why you don't see inferior colliculus here. Now comes the third nerve, nucleus. This is the nucleus and this is the third nerve. See, this is the third nerve. And these are the lemnisci, that is the medial, trigeminal and dorsal lemniscus, that is dorsal column lemniscus, that is medial lemniscus, trigeminal and the spinal lemniscus. And this is the substantia nigra, it should be shaded in the black actually. This is the substantia nigra and this is the crus cerebri, which has corticospinal or the corticobulbar, that is the pyramidal tract in the middle 3/5, whereas in the medial 1/5 you have the fibers of the frontopontine fibers, which is for the 7th nerve. And this thing here, let me label it in red for you. So this thing here is the red nucleus. Description given there is fibers of superior cerebellar peduncle are present in the red nucleus. So now let me erase all the labeling, and now you can appreciate the lesion of the Weber syndrome, which is involving the crus cerebral part and the third nucleus part. See, the third nerve part. That is for Weber syndrome. Now coming to the Benedict syndrome. Benedict syndrome involves the lemniscal part and the red nucleus part, the nerve part. See, it is the combination of Weber's plus Claude, right? Benedict's is Weber's plus Claude. So that is the combination diagram. Now coming to the Clot syndrome. It is a simple one which involves only the red nucleus. Since the third nerve is going like this, it also involves the third nerve. As already discussed, the third nerve is involved, the red nucleus is involved. Now coming to the dorsal ones, which are simple, that is the Parinaud syndrome, which is at the level of superior colliculus, whereas the Nothnagel syndrome, which is at quadrigeminal plate. The whole of this is involved in the quadrigeminal plate. See here, third nerve is involved because in the Nothnagel, this is also involved. Third nucleus is also involved. So third nerve is involved in the Nothnagel. These are the diagrams. Coming to the Pontine syndromes, you have ventral Pontine syndromes, dorsal and the lateral Pontine syndromes. In the ventral Pontine syndromes, you have Millard-Gubler syndrome and the Raymond syndrome. In the dorsal one, you have only one syndrome, that is Foville syndrome, and in the lateral, you have Mariefox syndrome. So usually we learn about Millard-Gubler syndrome and Foville syndrome, but there are 2 other syndromes that you need to know. One is Raymond syndrome and Mariefox syndrome. Firstly, coming to Millard-Gubler syndrome. In the Millard-Gubler syndrome, in the word Millard, you have 7 letters, and in the word Gubler, you have 6 letters. So it is the mnemonic is 7th nerve and the 6th nerve are involved in the Millard-Gubler syndrome. Coming to the Raymond syndrome, only 6th nerve is involved, 7th nerve is not involved. So guys, let us suppose this is the pons, and this Millard-Gubler and the Raymond syndrome occurs in the ventral and the medial portions. So since we have already learned the medial side, you have M for M, which is the motor tract, which is the corticospinal tract. So when the corticospinal tract is lost, that leads to contralateral hemiplegia, right? So that's why contralateral hemiplegia is seen in both the syndromes, that is Raymond and Millard Gubler. In the Millard Gubler, you have this extra seventh nerve. So here, this seventh nerve lesion is the element lesion, that is lower motor neuron lesion. So that's why the ipsilateral half of the face is gone. Ipsilateral half sensation of the face is gone. When we compare this with the seventh nerve lesion of the Weber's syndrome, that is the upper motor neuron lesion of the seventh nerve, here it is contralateral quadrant, only 1/4 of the face is gone. Contralateral, that is on the opposite side, only this quadrant is gone, right? So this is the difference between Millard Gubler's seventh nerve lesion and the Weber's seventh nerve lesion. I'll explain in a separate video regarding this element versus UMN of the seventh nerve, guys. For now, remember that in the Millard Gubler, it is element palsy. Remember, like M, both L's, that is element palsy of the seventh nerve. Whereas in the Weber's syndrome, it is UMN type of seventh nerve. Coming to the Raymond's, it is only sixth nerve and contralateral hemiplegia is common. Next, dorsal. Dorsal is Foville syndrome. So in the Foville syndrome, remember the word Foville also has 7 letters. F-O-V-I-L-L and E. So only seventh nerve is involved. Here also ipsilateral seventh nerve, lower motor neuron palsy. And corticospinal tract is involved because it is also comes under the dorsal surface but on the midline only. So since midline, motor is hemiplegia. Contralateral hemiplegia. Coming to the important point here, that is PPRF, para-pontine reticular formation is involved in the Foville syndrome. So let us understand what is PPRF actually. So this is the representation of the eye muscles, guys. So here you have the right eye, this is the left eye, this is the lateral rectus, medial rectus and the lateral rectus. So now let us understand. In the brain, that is in the frontal eye field, so left-sided frontal eye field sends its impulses or it is connected to right-sided PPRF. The right-sided PPRF sends the nerves or is in connection with right-sided sixth nerve nucleus. So from the sixth nerve nucleus, you have the nerve arising and it supplies the LR6, right? S44 and LR6. So LR6 is sixth nerve. So here, in order to supply this lateral rectus muscle, you should have the intact left FEF, right PPRF, right sixth nucleus and right LR. So this is the pathway. In between, we have a connection between sixth nerve nucleus and the third nerve nucleus. That connection is called as MLF, that is medial longitudinal fasciculus. So whenever there is a lesion in the PPRF, so let me mark that lesion with red. So whenever the lesion is in PPRF, let us suppose right-sided lesion in PPRF you have seen. So there is a lesion in this right PPRF, so that affects right-sided sixth nucleus, so that affects right LR. So this function is gone. Similarly, here on the opposite side, that is on the left side, since sixth nucleus is connected to third nucleus, this function is also gone because the impulses from this zone is totally stopped, right? So from here the flow, entire tract will be gone. So this third nucleus impulses are gone, so MR is gone. So here medial rectus is gone. So the person cannot see towards the right side because right lateral rectus is gone and left medial rectus is gone. So this direction movement is gone. That is conjugate gaze palsy. So whenever we say the term conjugate in eye, that means the two muscles which are involved in looking at the same direction. So for looking on the right side, you need to use your right lateral rectus and left medial rectus. Similarly, when you have to look towards the left side, you have to use left lateral rectus and right medial rectus. So these are called as conjugate muscles. This is one set of conjugate muscle and this is another set of conjugate muscle. So whenever the right PPRF is gone, you will have lesions in right lateral rectus movements and left medial rectus movement. That results in the conjugate gaze palsy, otherwise called as lateral gaze palsy. So this explains the Foville syndrome. Coming to lateral Pontine syndrome, that is otherwise called as Mariefox syndrome. Here we know that lateral is sideways, right? So you have a spinothalamic tract and a cerebellar peduncle. Since the spinothalamic tract is involved, contralateral pain and temperature is gone. Since the cerebellar peduncle is involved, you have the ataxia ipsilaterally. See, I have already discussed with you while explaining about the Claude syndrome. Since the red nucleus is involved, superior cerebellar peduncular fibers cross at the red nucleus. That's why it is having contralateral ataxia and contralateral tremors. Okay, but here only the peduncle is involved. So whenever the cerebellar peduncle is involved, it's only ipsilateral, it's not contralateral. See guys, here, if this is the midbrain, pons and medulla, there is cerebellum sidewise, right, around this brainstem. So for the midbrain and cerebellum, the connection is superior cerebellar peduncle, and in between the pons and the cerebellum, it is middle cerebellar peduncle, and for the medulla and cerebellum, it is inferior cerebellar peduncle. So there are three peduncles: superior, middle and inferior cerebellar peduncle. Since we are discussing about Pontine syndromes here, you will have middle cerebellar peduncle involved. That leads to ipsilateral ataxia. And 7th and 8th nerves are also involved, because laterally you have 7th and 8th. Medially you have 3, 4, 6, 12, right? In that also, in the pons you have only 6th nerve nucleus. So 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11 lies in the lateral side. Among those, you have only 5, 6, 7, 8 in pons, right? Rule of 4. So in this, 6th is medial, so remaining 5, 7, 8 are lateral. So since lateral Pontine syndrome, this is lateral Pontine syndrome, the laterally located nuclei, that is 7th and 8th are involved. So 7th again causes ipsilateral facial palsy, and 8th that it causes ipsilateral progressive deafness. I think you have understood the ventral, dorsal and lateral syndromes of the pons. It is actually easy guys, this 7th nerve point that I'll explain in a separate video also, but for now remember that if this is the cortex and this is the 7th nerve nucleus which is located in the pons, when you have the lesion from the cortex to the nucleus, that is called as UMN. Upper motor neuron is the neuron which generates from the cortex of the brain to the nucleus, whereas lower motor neuron is from the nucleus to the organ. That is LMN. Since in the Weber syndrome, the fibers that are involved are frontopontine fibers, right? See, I have shown you in the diagram also that the frontopontine fibers are involved in the Weber syndrome. See, frontopontine meaning from the frontal cortex to the pontine, that is to the pons, whatever the fiber is there, if that is involved, it is UMN. Whereas in the Pontine syndromes, the nucleus itself is involved. So that is the LMN. If the nucleus and from the nucleus the remaining downward part is involved, that is LMN. Whereas above the nucleus is UMN. So in the Weber syndrome, above the nucleus is involved, so upper motor neuron. Whereas in the Pontine lesions, the nucleus level and below the levels are involved, so it is LMN. So all the Pontine syndromes have this type of presentation in the facial nerve palsy, which is ipsilateral, half of the face is gone. Whereas in the Weber, since it is UMN type of lesion, contralateral quadrant of the face is gone. Now coming to the medullary syndromes. So medullary syndromes, it is easier among all the brainstem syndromes. That is medial medullary and lateral medullary. Medial is otherwise called as dejerine syndrome, and lateral is called as Valenberg syndrome. Now coming to the what are the structures involved in medial and lateral medullary syndromes. So medial, we already know that M for M, right? So M is motor, that is corticospinal tract, pyramid, contralateral hemiparesis. Then again in 3, 4, 6, 12, only 12th is in the medulla. So 12th nerve is involved, that causes deviation of the tongue. And here this same side is already explained in the separate video, which is rule of 17. You can find it on my channel, which explains 12 plus 5 is 17, right? So in the lesions of 12th nerve and 5th nerve, the tongue will be deviated to the same side in case of 12th nerve, and in case of 5th nerve, you will have the jaw deviated to the same side. So that is what is that rule of 17 video is about. You watch that video also, it is also an important topic. So 12th nerve lesion, tongue is deviated to the same side. And corticospinal tract, contralateral hemiparesis, because it is a tract. Coming to another M, that is medial lemniscus. So medial lemniscus is about dorsal column, right? I have already explained dorsal column, when it goes above, it forms the medial lemniscus. So dorsal column is all about position, proprioception, vibration. And MLF, that is medial longitudinal fasciculus, it causes internuclear ophthalmoplegia. So here in this diagram, if MLF is gone, that leads to medial medullary syndrome. Whereas if PPRF is gone, that causes Foville syndrome. PPRF is for Foville syndrome. Whereas medial longitudinal fasciculus is for medial medullary syndrome. Guys, I'll make a separate video on these two topics. One is LMN versus UMN of 7th now, and one is internuclear ophthalmoplegia. These two are also important topics. I'll make short 5 minutes videos on this after this video. Now let us understand all the 4 discussed points in the diagram below. So this is the cross section of the medulla. Cross section of medulla should be identified by this olivary nucleus, guys. So here is the inferior olivary nucleus. This itself tells that our level of cross section is at medulla. So now look at the brown color shaded region, which is medial medullary syndrome. So here you have the 12th nucleus. This blue one is 12th, and this sky blue colored one is medial longitudinal fasciculus, and this purple color one here is the medial lemniscus, which is the dorsal column, and here the green color one is the pyramid. So all these structures are involved in the medial medullary syndrome. Coming to the lateral medullary syndrome, which is otherwise called as Valenberg syndrome. Here all the SS, spinothalamic tract, spinocerebellar, sympathetic is involved. So spinothalamic tract is for pain and temperature. So contralateral loss of pain and temperature of the body. Spinocerebellar tract, since the cerebellar peduncle or cerebellar tract is involved, it is ipsilateral ataxia. Coming to sympathetic, it is Horner syndrome. Horner syndrome features are represented in a form of mnemonic, which is sample. So S is for sympathetic chain lesions, which causes Horner syndrome. A is anhydrosis, M is meiosis, T is ptosis, L is loss of ciliospinal reflex, and E is inophthalmos. So these are the features. Sample is the mnemonic for the features of Horner syndrome. Coming to the nerves involved, since the Valenberg syndrome is on the lateral side, except for 3, 4, 6, 12 nerves, you will have rest other nerves, right? Like 5, 7, 9, 10, 11. This fifth nerve causes ipsilateral loss of pain and temperature of the face. See guys, spinothalamic tract causes pain and temperature loss of the body on the contralateral side, whereas this fifth nerve causes on the ipsilateral side. So this is an important point that you need to know. Let me draw a diagram. If this is the face and this is the representation of the body of a person, whenever the fifth nerve is nothing but a cranial nerve, right? So whenever a cranial nerve lesion is there, I have already told you that it should be ipsilateral loss. So let us say right-sided, you have right-sided lateral medullary syndrome. Let us suppose like that. So what happens? Right-sided fifth nerve lesion you will see. So ipsilaterally, loss of pain and temperature from this side, right side of the face is gone. Whereas contralaterally from the body it is gone, because the tract that is involved is lateral spinothalamic tract. Lateral spinothalamic tract starts from C. It crosses, right, at the spinal cord level. I have already told you that lateral spinothalamic tract crosses. So whenever there is a lesion in the right side, the left side of the body is affected. So look at here. From here you will have this is the lateral spinothalamic tract going above from the left side to the right side. So the lesion is on the right side of the medulla. So this tract is gone. That means the signals from the left side of the body is gone. So this is the important point. Ipsilateral side of the face and contralateral side of the body, pain and temperature senses are lost. Coming to next 9, 10, because nucleus tractus solitarius, that is N for 9, T for 10 and S for 7. 7, 9, 10 are involved because those lie on the lateral side, and that results in the symptoms that we know, that is dysphagia, soft palate palsy, hoarseness and decreased gag reflex. It is all related to 9, 10 and 11. So here is the diagram for you. 8th nerve vestibular and cochlear component, 2 components it has, like vestibular cochlear nerve is 8th nerve, and nucleus tractus solitarius N for 9, T for 10 and S for 7, that is involved, and sensory nucleus of 5th nerve is involved. So ipsilateral pain and temperature of the face is gone, and spinothalamic tract is gone. So contralateral pain and temperature of body is gone, and here you have inferior cerebellar peduncle because it is at the level of medulla, and medial longitudinal fasciculus. If this is just labeled here, but that is involved in the medial medullary syndrome actually. So yeah, here it is involved. medial longitudinal fasciculus is involved in the medial medullary syndrome, which results in the INO. INO I'll teach in a separate video. So this completes the syndromes, guys. Whatever I have discussed is important. So medulla, pons, and midbrain. So now that I have discussed everything, let us solve few questions and consolidate this topic once for all. This is the table related to midbrain syndrome, guys. So try to answer, fill these gaps. Like I'll reveal the answer, just try to solve this. First one, it is mentioning that the site of lesion is at the base of midbrain and the structure involved is third nerve and the corticospinal tract. So that results in third nerve oculomotor palsy and corticospinal tract in the contralateral hemiplegia. So this must be Weber's syndrome, right? Yeah. Now coming to the next one, which is tegmentum of the midbrain. And third nerve nucleus and the red nucleus is involved. This is the clincher point. Superior cerebellar peduncle is also involved. So since the third nerve, it is oculomotor palsy. Since the red nucleus, it is tremor. And superior cerebellar peduncular fibers are involved, which crosses the red nucleus. That's why contralateral cerebellar ataxia. So this must be Clot syndrome. Yes. And then third one, base and tegmentum, both are involved. So all these two tables together here, and all the features are also same. So that means it should be Benedict syndrome, which is both Weber's plus Claude's. Now coming to next, that is tectum. We have entered the dorsal midbrain syndromes. In the tectum, we have a unilateral, bilateral, third cranial nerve, superior cerebellar peduncle, and vertical gaze center. So that is causing contralateral. This should be actually ipsilateral. Ocular palsies, vertical gaze palsy, ataxia, tremors, nystagmus. So this should be Nothnagel. Coming to the last one, dorsal midbrain is involved, superior colliculus. This itself is a clincher point. Superior colliculus is about Parinaud syndrome, sunset sign, skew deviation of eye. All these are the clincher words which should lead you towards the diagnosis of Parinaud syndrome. So this completes the midbrain syndrome. I have brought you a pearl here. So you also have these few syndromes, Anton syndrome and Balin syndrome. These are the extra syndromes. I have written every point that you need to know. Read this from the PDF. There's nothing to explain from this. And Weber's already done. Parinaud is done and Benedict syndrome is done. Now let us discuss the questions, guys. So it has already become a lengthy video. That's why I have skipped this table. You just read this table. There's nothing to explain from that. First question here. So yeah, a patient with ipsilateral third nerve palsy and contralateral hemiplegia, the diagnosis is. So ipsilateral third nerve and contralateral hemiplegia is nothing but crossed hemiplegia. So crossed hemiplegia is the term we have learnt in Weber's syndrome, which is the midbrain syndrome. Coming to second question, which of the following is false regarding Weber's syndrome? So contralateral hemiplegia is true. Ipsilateral third nerve palsy is true. Contralateral Parkinson's syndrome is also true because substantia nigra is involved in the Weber's syndrome, right? Because it is at the level of midbrain. When that is gone, contralateral Parkinson's features are seen. But ipsilateral seventh nerve is wrong, guys, because I have already compared this with the Weber's and the Millard Gubler. In the Millard Gubler, you'll have ipsilateral loss, whereas in the Weber's, you have contralateral loss. This is the answer. Coming to the third one, thrombosis of pica, that is posterior inferior cerebellar artery, causes what? Weber's, lateral medullary, medial medullary, and Millard Gubler syndrome. So you have to get that diagram straight into your mind. That pictographic memory, vertebral arteries together forms basilar artery. Basilar artery gives posterior cerebral arteries. And from the basilar artery, you have the branches ICA and superior cerebellar artery. And coming to the vertebral artery, you have a branch called as pica. And posteriorly, the vertebral artery extends as anterior spinal artery. So this is the diagram that you need to have in your mind whenever you solve the questions of brainstem syndrome. So pica is asked, that is related to lateral medullary syndrome. In Weber syndrome, it is PCA, right? Because it is midbrain syndrome. And medial medullary syndrome, it is about vertebral artery or pica sometimes. And coming to the Millard Gubler, that is pons, right? Millard Gubler is towards the center, like medial side only. So the answer should be basilar here. I have already written these arteries names just below the syndromes, guys. See, anterior spinal artery, medial medullary syndrome. And lateral medullary syndrome is pica or vertebral artery. Coming to the Pontine syndromes, basilar artery is for medial ones, that is Millard, Gubler and the Raymonds. And here it is like dorsally it is superior cerebellar artery, which is a branch of basilar artery, and lateral pontine is ICA. Coming to the midbrain syndromes, all the midbrain syndromes are by PCA stroke, that is posterior cerebral artery stroke. So this question is done now. Medial medullary, mostly anterior spinal artery should be the answer. Anterior spinal artery for medial medullary, and Millard Gubler is basilar, lateral medullary is vertebral or pica. Now coming to the fourth one, which of the following is not expected in Valenberg? So firstly Valenberg, what is Valenberg syndrome? It is L and L, that is lateral medullary syndrome. So yeah, laterally the mnemonic is sideways, that is S, all S's should come. So let us see. Firstly, ipsilateral ataxia. Yes, ipsilateral ataxia is seen because at the level of medulla you have that spinocerebellar tract. So ipsilateral ataxia is seen, S is done. Then contralateral hemiplegia. Contralateral hemiplegia is something related to motor tract, which is corticospinal tract. So motor is something related to midline syndromes, right? Medial syndrome. So, but lateral medullary syndrome is a lateral syndrome. So mostly this should be the answer because contralateral hemiplegia is given. Let us see further also. In the option C, you have vertigo, which is related to 8th nerve. So yeah, 3, 4, 6, 12 nerves are in the midbrain, but 8th nerve is laterally only, and the syndrome is also lateral, that is under discussion. So that might be there. And next is impaired sensation of ipsilateral half of the face. Yeah, this is true because for the 5th nerve, you have impaired sensation on the ipsilateral half of the face. So yeah, B is the answer here. Contralateral hemiplegia is not seen. Contralateral hemiplegia is seen with medial medullary syndrome. That is dejerine syndrome, but not Valenberg syndrome. 5th one, neurological examination reveals paralysis of upward and downward gaze, absence of convergence, absence of pupillary reflex. So everything that is related to here, gaze palsy, absence of convergence, that is light near dissociation because pupillary reflex is not there. So everything is pointing towards Parinaud syndrome here. So as we know, Parinaud syndrome is from the dorsal midbrain. So dorsal meaning tectum, right? So eliminate the options of tegmentum at the first look itself. That B and C are ruled out because they mention tegmentum. And E is also mentioning tegmentum, so that is also one. So answer should be in between A and D, tectum and tectum. Okay, fine. Now, is it caudal or rostral? So in the midbrain, caudal is tail. We already know that. Cranial is head and caudal means tail, right? So caudal is at the level of inferior colliculus, whereas rostral is at the level of superior colliculus. We know that Parinaud syndrome occurs at the level of superior colliculus. So your answer should be rostral, midbrain, tectum. So option D is the answer. Because caudal midbrain, you will have inferior colliculus at which you have the 4th nerve nucleus. But here it is telling you that pupillary reflex is gone and convergence is gone. Everything is related to 3rd nucleus level. That is superior colliculus level. So the answer is rostral, midbrain, tectum. Coming to the 6th question, which of the following is not involved in the lateral medullary syndrome, which is Valenberg syndrome? Sympathetic tract is involved because S. 9th and 10th cranial nerve, yeah. Nucleus tractus solitarius has 7, 9 and 10. It is involved. Then 12th now, this is doubtful because 3, 4, 6, 12 are in the midline. But this is the lateral medullary syndrome, so this must be the answer. And coming to next one, spinothalamic is S, that is also involved. So this is how you need to solve the questions of BRAINSTEM so that you will never go wrong in solving these questions. Next is 7th question. Ventral Pontine Syndrome is what among these? Parinaud syndrome is dorsal midbrain syndrome. Millard Gubler is Pontine syndrome. Foville syndrome is also a Pontine syndrome, and Mariefox is also. But Mariefox is lateral Pontine syndrome. Foville is dorsal Pontine syndrome, and Millard Gubler is ventral. Along with Millard Gubler, another ventral is Raymond's, right? Millard Gubler 6th, 7th, Foville is 7th, and Mariefox is here. Mariefox syndrome. I'll show you again. 7th and 8th nerves, which is otherwise called as lateral Pontine syndrome. So the 7th question is also done. The answer is Millard Gubler syndrome. Coming to 8th the question, which of the following is wrong? So guys, will you answer this question for me in the comment section? I'll be waiting for your answers. That will help me know if I have explained this topic in detail or if you have understood this topic in detail or not, because this took me a lot of time to prepare the notes and explain these brainstem syndromes. It's actually a difficult topic. Many people consider it as a difficult, but it is not according to me, because you have to go in an order to solve this question, so that you have to rule out and come to an answer. That will be easy. So answer this question for me now in the comment section. Thank you.